Alright. When I thought about writing the video you're about to watch, I told myself it was going to be pretty simple and that we would just, without paying too much attention, have a good laugh for 10 minutes, then move on to something else. But the more I thought about it, the more it stirred up ambivalent feelings in me. Today, I invite you to discover someone who may be the worst singer in the history of music, who may very well have inspired the character of Castafiore in the adventures of Tintin, but who may also be dead. The mockery she was subjected to. Alright, so no worries, okay, this isn't a moralizing video, but this story makes me ask myself questions that I don't necessarily have answers to, and I'd like to discuss them with you today. Let me just say, the comment section is wide open for you. So, let's talk a bit about Florence Foster Jenkins. I discovered her in a rather ironic way through a song by the French singer Juliette. If you don't know her and you like songs, she's French with really well-written lyrics, go for it. So, I'm not going to play you any excerpts because I care about my monetization, but in her song Casserole et Fossé, which is an ode to people who sing out of tune, she says this. An American billionaire wanted to steal the opera, which gave us a few headaches, and then an expensive record because of that. And when I heard those lines, I didn't get the reference. So I searched on Google, and I wasn't disappointed. Narcisse Florence Foster was born in 1868 in Pennsylvania, and at a very young age she discovered a passion for music and especially for singing. She told her father she wanted to study music. She began studying piano seriously, but when she announced that she wanted to take up singing, he refused. And you'll see that he probably had his reasons. Frustrated by this decision, she ran away with the man who would become her husband, Dr. Frank Thornton Jenkins. But since he's no more motivated to let her sing than her father was, the marriage won't last, because they divorce in 1902.
It's not because he cheated on her. Let's just say it would still seem that he gave her an STD, and a serious one at that.
No, but you come in without introducing yourself, keep your shoes on while walking on the carpet, and just walk in like that.
Me, I'm Olivier Trommenschlager.
Trommenschlager yourself.
No, that's my name. It's Alsatian.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Trommenschlager, yourself?
That's why it's better to call me Tromi. My channel is Le Temple Saint, where I discuss opera.
My condolences? What do you mean? Well, yes. Talking about opera on YouTube, what nonsense. We're on AstronoGeek discussing it. There's your proof.
Yeah, but at the same time, if we were still talking about astronomy on AstronoGeek, people would know. Can I go? So, as I was saying, it seems that Florence's first husband left her with a gift, syphilis. You might know it better by its modern name, syphilis. Today, syphilis is treated with strong antibiotics, but Florence Foster Jenkins' syphilis was treated with the methods of the time, which included, among other things, mercury and arsenic. So, there you go. Now, this cocktail of medications, as well as the disease itself, are known to cause, among other things, tremors or muscle stiffness, neurological disorders, hearing problems, or proprioception issues, which means awareness of one's own body. To say that this had an influence on her control of her vocal cords or on how she perceived her own voice, let's just say we'll take that information and keep it on a sticky note.
7 years later, her wealthy father dies and Florence inherits his fortune. She can now live off her inheritance and do whatever she wants, and what she wants is to become an opera singer. This was a plan her husband, Frank Jenkins, had already tried to discourage, and perhaps he had his own reasons as well. That year, she began dating an actor who later became her agent. Living in Philadelphia at the time, she founded a music club, took singing lessons, and gave her first recital in 1912. Up to this point, it sounds like a pretty ordinary singing career, and you might still think we're just talking about someone who's not very talented. But if Florence Foster Jenkins made history in music, it's because she wasn't just bad. No, at that point it was a performance. She was completely devoid of any sense of rhythm or pitch and pronounced the lyrics as if she was just mumbling them.
Yes, melted cheese is important or you'll sing badly.
All the while being deeply convinced that she was one of the greatest opera singers of her time. Alright, now, to help you understand just how bad it was, we're not just going to explain it to you. We have to show you. So, context.
Well, if I say Mozart, well, you know him. But even if you don't listen to Mozart, you might at least know the magic flute. The work, written in German, was not intended for the imperial court, but for a broad, middle-class Viennese audience that came to be entertained. That's why the work mixes humor, magic, spoken dialogues, and some completely crazy virtuoso arias. It was so popular, it was soon considered a masterpiece. Unfortunately, Momo didn't get to enjoy this in his lifetime. We'll cover that in another video, as that's not the topic here.
Yeah, at your place then, right?
Yeah, at my place. I'm not one to impose.
No, not at all.
Well, basically, in the second act, the evil queen of the night demands that her kind daughter Pamina kill the high priest Zarastro, or else she will disown her.
Yeah, it's opera, you know?
And so, this aria of the Queen of the Night, you know it even if you don't know Mozart's work, and even if you don't know the piece, even under the Bitzelmeier. That's what you wrote? Even with the Bitzelmeier, you know at least 7 lyrical flights. Well, to sing this thing, you can't be a dummy. Well, a female dummy. Singers are often identified by their vocal range. In music, the vocal range, or the register if you're talking about an instrument, is basically the set of notes you can produce with it, without straining. For example, if you accidentally slam Piaget's balls in the shower door, the note he'll manage to produce probably won't be part of his vocal range. Piaget came to see me perform the magic flute in Versailles last year. Singers are mainly distinguished by the notes they can sing. And from these abilities, an identity pretty much emerges, in a way. From the lowest to the highest, you have basses, baritones, and tenors for men, and for women, altos, mezzo-sopranos, and above that, sopranos. And yes, it can be very pleasant when the sopranos are on top. Well, obviously we're not dealing with an exact science here. 200 guitariamas made on an assembly line will all have exactly the same range and the same sound. But since all human beings are different, and each has unique vocal cords or a unique larynx, you obviously have to expect that physiologically they won't be capable of exactly the same things. The length and thickness of the vocal cords, the anatomy of the throat, mouth, tongue, sinuses, in short, everything we have in there, all play a part in a singer's intrinsic ability to reach, or not reach, certain notes. And all of that, of course, not to mention the muscular and technical work that will also shape not only the way someone sings, but also the instrument itself. Let's return to our group of female singers, specifically the highest voices, the sopranos.
Or sopranis, if you want to show off by using the Italian plural.
Well, generally in France we say sopranos. Even using masculine words, we're still referring to female singers. If the singer has balls, we're likely talking about a countertenor or haute contre, a very high male vocal range reminiscent of what was expected from castrati, who weren't women with balls, but men who had lost theirs. You follow? Basically, among sopranos, there are several voice types with roughly equivalent ranges. Alright, so for the 4 people coming from my channel, don't freak out, I'm going to simplify things as much as possible. We have lighter sopranos, who are agile, have clear voices, easy high notes, and a tone that's almost childlike. Next, you have the lyric sopranos, still agile, but with a bit more substance. Let's say more like women. Often young, but definitely women nonetheless. And then you have the dramatic sopranos, who have a voice that's richer in the lower range, often used for roles of strong-willed women who really pack a punch. And though it's still feminine, it's actually still seriously badass though.
Is there something about balls, or is it just me?
When they hit high notes, light sopranos sound like a nervous motorcycle, while dramatic sopranos are more like a 400-ton high-speed train. 401 if Jan and I are inside. But to reach that high F there. That thing perched so high above the stuff that you have to add 3 extra lines, you need to add a plug-in to your program, the coloratura. Coloratura is a skill that allows you to reach very fast notes with surgical precision, high notes that are sometimes even outside your comfortable vocal range. Staccato notes. fast vocal runs, extreme notes. While every vocal range, male or female, includes roles that require these skills, the majority of coloratura roles are written for sopranos who specialize in them and are therefore called coloratura sopranos. Yes, in opera, we don't necessarily bother much with the names we have. It's pretty intuitive, but most coloratura sopranos have very youthful voices, which doesn't fit the character of the Queen of the Night, who is a strong, warrior-like woman and old enough to have a post-pubescent daughter dreaming of her Prince Charming on his white horse. And that's why, if possible, we look for the winning combo, a dramatic coloratura soprano. A soprano capable of singing the lowest notes of the aria with enough power, then hitting the runs, the staccato notes, and that crazy high F at the very top of the range. That note is higher than when Brick gets his balls caught in the shower door. Of course, as I said, every voice is unique, so it's more subtle than just asking whether the Queen should be sung by a coloratura or a dramatic coloratura. But basically, as long as the technical skills are there enough to pull it off, at least 99% of the time, it's doable. Ultimately, the choice isn't about that note, since if it's done well, it will be heard regardless because it's so high, but about the rest of what needs to be sung. For example, at the end of the aria, when the Queen repeats hoot, hoot, hurt, 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 hurt with that sustained note. As a result, the orchestra really goes all out. If your voice isn't rich enough, it often loses its flavor. And we're not even talking about the first aria, less famous but just as difficult and more central, which also requires at least some guts, some body, while also having a counter F, by the way. Hoot. But anyway, to put it simply, this aria is a very difficult, very technical exercise, and in which you still have to convey the most important thing, which is emotion. In short, an aria accessible only to those who have worked enough, conscientiously and efficiently. Well, that was all very technical, but I wanted you to realize that you can't just jump into this exercise any old way.
And now, it's time to talk again about the subject of this video, Florence Foster Jenkins. Here is the Queen of the Night's soaring passage. So, I can't play more for you because this piece is protected by copyright and would block the video. It's fully available on YouTube. I promise.
Present.
Can you explain how people who sing well do it, Ba?
More or less, yes.
And can you explain?
That, yes. So, to put it simply, the vocal cords are at the bottom of the larynx. The voice is produced by air passing through, making the cords vibrate against each other as long as they're close enough. Then it gets louder as it passes through hollow spaces. Put your finger on your larynx. And a vowel. Piggy? When you swallow, the larynx rises, the epiglottis closes, and the vocal cords also close. Now, yawn.
Yeah, well, I can't do that on command either.
Think about a video of restraint.
Yeah, it's lower now.
Exactly. When we yawn, the larynx drops, relaxes, and opens up resonance areas. The opera singer tries to keep the vocal cords tightly closed like when you swallow, while keeping the larynx low like when you yawn. Well.
So that's what makes a beautiful voice, among other things?
Yes. When you do that, the voice becomes more even, flexible, and adapts to pitch changes. A bit like a car, each register is a gear. Even top singers reveal when they switch to third or fifth gear.
And Florence Foster Jenkins?
Well, she sang with a very high larynx. That's perfect for the seagull screaming contest at the Dunkirk Carnival, but a bit less so for opera. I listened to the recordings to prepare the video. What's most surprising is that she always sings in the same vocal register. A bit like Aunt Simone, who always drives in second gear. The car smokes, but she's calm.
And here indeed the car is smoking. Search on YouTube for Florence Foster Jenkins and you'll immediately find the recording she paid for with her fortune. Yeah, because today, anyone can make a home studio, but not in the 1920s or 30s. Florence Foster Jenkins owed her career only to her money. And obviously you don't need to have any knowledge of music to enjoy this massacre. That's wrong, it's not in place. You can feel that the pianist accompanying him is making superhuman efforts to make up for his total lack of rhythm, but well, it's like a B-movie at the cinema. You know, those movies that are so bad they end up finding their audience. By the way, I'll give you a scoop. Sébastien from Vous avez le droit is a fan of Florence Foster Jenkins. First of all, that's not true. And secondly, I told you not to repeat it.
Yeah, at the same time they must have dated, so he still has a certain fondness for his first love. Tricky Teen sings a bit less off-key, I think.
And maybe that's the tragedy of Florence Foster Jenkins. Thanks to her fortune, she only performed in private venues with a hand-picked audience, let's say. And so, the feedback she received was either from her friends, who probably had questionable taste or were too obsequious to upset their wealthy friend, or from critics who, let's say, were being subtle. Well, for example, you might say that this life speaks to us in every way, but do you know the wine La Villageoise? That kind of gut rot sold in plastic bottles. Well, if you look for reviews, that's what you find. You have to try everything at least once, probably the greatest wine experience I've ever had. Plus, at 11% you can fill your glass to the brim. Thank you, Carrefour. A good gut rot to sip with friends under a bridge on the Seine. Every wine lover should taste this exceptional vintage at least once in their life. This wine saved my best friend's life after he got shot. The disinfection was quick, and when I tried to take him to the hospital, there was no more gas. Fortunately, La Villageoise gave my vehicle a boost. You can really taste the sunlit hillsides unless it's the vineyard's wire that got pressed with the grapes. Since I opened the bottle, even the kitchen mites have left. For the price, nothing to complain about. The most cost-effective way to get drunk. If you want to get wasted for cheap, this is the right choice. It has qualities that no fine wine can match. Its bottle is sturdy and will withstand everyday drops. It's easy to open and you can reuse the container to make a tugep. Or something similar. Do you remember Renault's song, Coronavirus? Bastard virus. Actually, what's memorable about this song is neither the song nor the music video. It's the comments section. There are songs that make you want to both drink and quit drinking at the same time. I set it as my alarm for 7 in the morning, but I automatically wake up at 6:30, I listen to this song on repeat, and miraculously my kids finally decided to get their own apartment. Congratulations to the Ministry of Health for this wonderful video against alcoholism. This song is so good my neighbors threw a brick through my window to hear it better. I played this music in the car when leaving for vacation. My dog abandoned me at a highway rest stop. Maintenant? Now imagine there are no social networks, no contest for who can make the funniest comment, but after hearing Florence Foster Jenkins, people make this kind of comment. Well, the lady is going to make the audience curious. Curious about her performances that are so disastrous. And honestly, I invite you to go listen to it on YouTube. It's so bad that it actually becomes fascinating. And that's the whole tragedy of Florence Foster Jenkins. Because she's so bad that the audience rushes to come listen to her. She is deeply convinced of her talent. So when reviews of this kind, mocking but with a double meaning, reach her ears. She concludes these are glowing reviews. Another proof of her talent is that the theaters are full during her performances. And when she sees someone giggling in the audience, well, she concludes that these are people who are jealous of her talent. So she becomes more confident and tackles increasingly difficult pieces, which she butchers with even more enthusiasm. There are some funny anecdotes, such as her throwing flowers to the audience. Literally, I mean, she would throw flowers into the audience and she would throw the basket along with them. So yeah, that must have been something to see. But still, she performed in private venues, her audience was strictly limited, and she personally supervised the distribution of tickets. Until the day she gave in to her audience, who asked her to perform in a more prestigious venue. On October 25, 1944, she performed at Carnegie Hall in New York. Tickets sold out in the weeks leading up to the performance. Celebrities are in the audience: actors, opera singers, composers, conductors. All the elite are there to hear the famous Florence Foster Jenkins. And since the performance is open to the public this time, the press critics are also joining the event. And that's where my feelings about this story become, as I was saying, ambivalent. Obviously, the audience laughs, but they're not laughing with her, they're laughing at her. And the critics tear her apart. According to those close to her, these scathing reviews hit her hard. 2 days after the concert, Florence Foster Jenkins had a heart attack and would die a month later on November 26, 1944 at the age of 76. Of course, there is no formal evidence that this heart attack was directly related to the events of the previous days. Well, the lady was 76 years old. But allow me to speak to you as a YouTuber. A public figure, and therefore someone subject to public opinions which can be extremely harsh. For someone who lived her whole life under the illusion of being a great opera singer, an illusion that shatters in a single performance, making her the laughingstock of all New York, I agree with those who think that this heart attack could be attributed to the stress that followed. Especially with a fragile 76-year-old heart. We're still far from social media, but the poor woman still must have seen major newspapers completely destroy her and known that all of New York would read them. I personally know the effect of a shitstorm on stress or morale. And above all, I know that shitstorms do exist. Florence Foster Jenkins, however, was unaware of that. She was expecting a triumph. Instead, she got a mountain of mockery and scathing criticism. It's not hard to imagine the stress it put her under. And so, even though I don't have any more evidence to support this, I have a strong feeling that if her heart was fragile, well, it was that shitstorm that dealt the final blow. So, to wrap up the story, what remains of Florence Foster Jenkins are a few concert photos, 5 recordings on vinyl, 78 RPM records, the unverified rumor that she might have inspired the character of the Castafiore in Tintin, Lui Itaquas, and 2 films, the most recent from 2016 with Meryl Streep in the role of Jenkins. Well, when I discovered this colorful character, my first reaction was laughter. She sings so off-key that it's actually a performance. But still, even though I'm going to have a hard time doing her any harm today, I can't help but think that maybe it was Mockery that killed her. So, as I told you, I'm not here to lecture you about online mockery, but it does make me ask myself some questions that I'd like to share with you, and I invite you to discuss them in the comments. Let's be clear, I don't have a definite answer. I'm just asking questions, that's all. First of all, this isn't the first time I've said it, but is it better to have a harsh truth or a comforting lie? Should Jenkins's friends and family have bluntly told her that she sang terribly instead of feeding her illusions with a bunch of obsequious compliments? It's worth noting that 2 people, who we can assume at least cared about her a little, her father and her husband, discouraged her from singing. Would it have been better to crush her opera dreams or let her make a fool of herself? Was Florence Foster Jenkins' happiness, shattered at the very end of her life, nothing but an illusion? And what does that say about us, the audience? No, because reviews of La Villageoise wine make me laugh until I cry, just like the comments on Renault's video. Even when I laugh until I cry, I still can't help but imagine myself in their shoes. Sure, it's funny to laugh about it, just like it's funny to laugh at the thousands of videos online where people take epic falls. It's funny to turn any celebrity who does something weird into a meme, for sure. But what happens when these people aren't aware they're being ridiculous? Like Jenkins. I'm also sure that Renault convinces himself that the comments under his video are just the work of jealous people. Same thing, do people who do something particularly ridiculous but still post the video realize that they come across as idiots? Do they make fun of other people's lives, just not care at all, or are they simply unaware? Did the people who ended up in Antoine Daniel's What the Cut think they had uploaded a masterpiece before getting roasted? So, for people who do completely lame stuff, is it actually doing them a favor to tell them it's good just to protect them from criticism? Isn't it just delaying and making worse the moment when they'll flop and get hit with a ton of mockery that could destroy them psychologically? Well, I do think that when a 4-year-old kid shows you their drawing, it's better to tell them you're proud of them. But for an adult, is it really doing them a favor to praise their crap? And about mockery itself, mocking someone is what Doka calls oppressive humor. But well, I'm sorry, it makes me laugh, even though I know that someone is on the receiving end of those jokes. I'd like to say that we should just stick to non-oppressive humor, but generally it's about as bland as a raw lettuce leaf. It's silly to say, but the humor that truly makes people laugh is always at someone's or something's expense. So what do we do then? I'm also thinking about the Vilbricken drama. The story of Mante and Cristo, that's a stroke of genius. It was funny. And on the other side, Pierre Chabrier probably took the worst harassment in the history of French-speaking YouTube. Harassment that was mostly made up of mockery, well, some of which was actually very funny. That's the ambivalent feeling I was telling you about. On one hand, the comment contests are often hilarious, but honestly, I also feel bad for those who end up being the butt of the joke. I remind myself that awareness doesn't excuse me from responsibility. But in the meantime, I also can't help but find it funny. I can't read something and decide not to find it funny. I can say that some things don't make me laugh, but at the same time, it's almost a reflex reaction to chuckle after reading something I find funny. I don't think to myself, that's funny, now I'll laugh. I just laugh spontaneously. But then, does laughing at someone being mocked or at a video where someone falls make me a psychopath? And what should I do about the fact that I laugh and the next second I feel empathy for that person? I'm a semi-psychopath. I'll tell myself the problem is social media or mob mentality, but there wasn't social media in Jenkins' time. Just the press and word of mouth. So, is the problem that these mockeries reach the ears of the person involved, yet reality doesn't stop existing just because we're not aware of it? Is being the subject of mockery without knowing it really an enviable situation? So, is the problem about the amount of mockery that a few are acceptable but not thousands? Except that that's not something you can decide. Especially when it comes to a celebrity. Or is the problem about participating? So, well, yes. But even if no one participates, it only takes one person to make a good joke to get everyone laughing anyway. Just by reading or hearing the said remark. Isn't the problem maybe the artist's inner circle, who, instead of flattering them, should just tell them that what they're doing is crap and that they're exposing themselves to ridicule if they go public, as has most likely happened, done, and surely with kindness, by Jenkins' father and husband? Or maybe the problem is at the root with people who are unable to have any perspective on their own work, whatever it may be, and convince themselves they're talented, even though there is always at least one person who could, well, at least have some reservations about it. People who are unable to hear that they're bad, even when they're told directly with kindness, who prefer to live in denial, who go against the recommendations given to them. But who would be the first ones to blame the day it blows up in their faces? Alright, so what then? You can't forbid someone from showing their work to the world just because you think it's bad. But still, if the only person who doesn't see it is herself, is it still someone else's responsibility? You see, I think that Florence Foster Jenkins is ridiculously funny, and that her death, if it was caused, as I believe, by the stress of the massively negative feedback from her first public performance, is a terrible injustice. But I don't know who to blame. What I am sure of, however, is that this story resonates with all the ones we see today on YouTube and social media in general. And I honestly have no idea what conclusion we should draw from it. I just think that every time we see something ridiculous, a buzz, a shitstorm, a flood of mocking comments, before doing anything, we have to keep in mind that on the other side, whether we like them or not, there's a human being.
As an artist, you put yourself out there. You take the risk of telling the world, here, I made this. For live performances, it's even more accurate to say, come, I'm going to do this. Each time you sing, whether you're Roberto Alagna or a new conservatory student, you risk missing a note. And once you've missed it, it's missed. Some sour notes are really funny, others are much sadder. My first singing teacher used to say, we put our balls on the table and give our soul to whoever listens to us. We sing because we need to sing. It's visceral. And someone who isn't a singer will never be able to understand. We expose ourselves often to an audience, or, even more daunting, an audition panel whose judgment can directly affect your career and life. We face all the doubts and fears as best we can, hoping to deliver at least a performance that represents what we know how to do. With that being said, what sets Florence Foster Jenkins apart from a real singer? She threw herself into it with disarming sincerity, she didn't lack courage, she didn't lack desire, and she undoubtedly gave as much of herself as any singer could. The only major difference is the level and the perception of her level. She is said to have declared, maybe people can say that I sang badly, but they can't say that I didn't sing. And that's absolutely true. And a quick what if, remember the post-it from the start of the episode? What kind of singer would she have become if she hadn't caught syphilis and had to suffer the consequences of both the disease and the treatment? Would she have been the role model for young Maria Callas, or would she have simply been Florence? Foster Jenkins still, I would add that believing there's Foster Jenkins on one side and on the other, all the other singers who are more like Pavarotti, would be completely wrong. You run into Foster Jenkins types at every open audition and competition. Usually without the money. Is it worse or is it better? That's one of the hidden sides of singers, one that I won't necessarily talk about often on my channel because, well, it's a lot less fun. Thanks to Arno for inviting me and letting me open up. There's a well-known saying that goes, criticism is easy, art is difficult. And very often, the first to make fun of a half-decent performance are those who wouldn't even be able to achieve a quarter of it themselves. In a way, doesn't simply daring to make yourself vulnerable by putting yourself out there already deserve at least some respect?
Speaking of putting yourself out there, Trommy's channel is right here and it talks about seals, waterproofing, ducts, drainage, air conditioners and morgues. No, of course, it's about opera. With fun? Go ahead, say it.
Wait, let's do this right. Look up at the head. Look up at the sky. Be astronomical. And see you later.